guys, welcome back to this YouTube channel. I have a different guest today. This is Camper. It's my sister's dog and my sister's here. So that's what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reading chapter 13. So yesterday we read chapter 12 together, and chapter 12 was called More Mouths to Feed. And the last chapter that we read, we found out that Greta and Captain Cook had 10 babies. So they had 10 eggs, and all the eggs hatched, and they have 10 babies now. So Mr. Popper and his family have 12 total penguins in their house right now. So this next chapter that we're going to read is called Money Worries. And whenever I left you guys yesterday, I asked you to think about what is going to happen in this chapter. What do you guys think is going to happen now that you know that the title is Money Worries? So just keeping that in mind while we listen to our story about what's going to happen. So this chapter is a little short, but it has a lot of good stuff in it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to read chapter 13, Money Worries. All right. There came a night, however, when Mrs. Popper, having put the children to bed, stopped Mr. Popper on his way to the cellar. "Papa," she said, "I must talk to you. Come and sit down." "Yes, my love," said Mr. Popper. "What's on your mind?" "Papa," said Mrs. Popper, "I'm glad to see you having such a nice vacation, and I must say that it has been easier than usual to keep the place tidy, with you down in the basement all the time. But Papa, what are we going to do for money?" "What's the trouble?" asked Mr. Popper. "Well, of course the penguins have to eat, but have you any idea what the bills for all those live fish are? I'm sure I don't know how we are ever going to pay for them, and the engineer who put in the basement freezing plants keeps ringing the doorbell and asking for his money." "Is our money all gone?" asked Mr. Popper quietly. "Practically all of it, of course. When it's all gone, maybe we could eat the 12 penguins for a while." "Oh no, Mama," said Mr. Popper, "you don't mean that." "Well, I don't suppose I really could enjoy eating them, especially Greta and Isabella," said Mrs. Popper. "It would break the children's heart too," said Mr. Popper. He sat there thoughtfully for quite a while. "I have an idea, Mama," he said at last. "Maybe we could sell them to somebody, and then we could have a little money to live on," said Mrs. Popper. "No," said Mr. Popper, "I have a better idea. We will keep the penguins." "Mama, you have heard of a trained seal acting in theaters?" "Of course I have heard of that. A trained seal?" answers Mrs. Popper. "I even saw some once. They balanced balls on the ends of their noses." "Very well then," said Mr. Popper. "If there can be trained dogs and trained seals, why can't there be trained penguins?" "Perhaps you're right, Papa." "Of course I am right. And you can help me train the penguins." The next day they had the piano moved down into the basement at one end of the ice rink. Mrs. Popper had not played the piano since she had married Mr. Popper, but with a little practice she soon began to remember some of the pieces she had forgotten. "What these penguins like to do most," said Mr. Popper, "is to drill like an army, to watch Nelson and Columbus get in a fight with each other, and to climb up steps and toboggan down. And so we will build our act around those tricks." "They don't need costumes anyway," said Mrs. Popper. "Look at the draw little figures. They already have a costume." So Mrs. Popper picked out 3 different tunes to play on the basement piano, one for each kind of act. Soon the penguins knew from hearing the music just what they were to do. When they were supposed to parade like a lot of soldiers, Mrs. Popper played Schubbert's Military March. When Nelson and Columbus were to fight each other with flippers, Mrs. Popper played the Merry Widow Waltz. When the penguins were supposed to climb and toboggan, Jane and Billy would drag out into the middle of the ice 2 portable stepladders and a board that Mr. Popper had used when he was decorating houses. Then Miss Popper would play a pretty descriptive piece called By the Brook. It was cold in the cellar, of course, so that Mrs. Popper had learned to play the piano with her gloves on. By the end of January, Mr. Popper was sure the penguins were ready to appear in any theater in the country. So that is chapter 13. So just to recap kind of what happened in this chapter. So the title was Money Worries, and at the beginning Mr. Popper was kind of worried about or Mrs. Popper was kind of worried about what they were going to do about money, and she was talking to Mr. Popper about it. And Mr. Popper said, Miss Popper said, why don't we sell the penguins? And Mr. Popper was like, no, I don't think that's a good idea, but I do think that we could train them. So this is where it kind of introduces the idea that Mr. Popper is going to train the penguins to do some sort of cool act in front of people maybe. Maybe this is what he's thinking that they're going to make their money from. And then at the very last sentence that says, by the end of January, Mr. Popper was sure the penguins were ready to appear in any theater around the country. So by the end of January, Mr. Popper already knew that these penguins were ready to go and that they were ready to perform for these people. So that is what happened in chapter 13. It was kind of a short chapter. So tomorrow what we'll read is chapter 14, and it's called Mr. Greenbaum. Mr. Greenbaum is the title. So just thinking about that title, what could we infer about that? What do you guys think is going to happen just by listening to that title? If you guys have any comments about what happened in this chapter, or if you have any predictions about what's going to happen in the next chapter, you can comment below this video, or you can message me on Class Dojo, and I would love to hear what you guys are thinking about this story. And if you've watched the movie, let me know. But I miss you guys, and I wish I could be with you. But I will see you tomorrow when we read chapter 13. Bye, guys!